It's a good time to be a Star Trek fan. The last time there were this many Star Trek projects in production at the same time, I was a teenager. Wait, no, I wasn't, because there have never been this many Star Trek projects in production at the same time. As of this recording, there are 5 TV/streaming series currently in production, 3 live action, 2 animated, plus another feature film in development, plus 2 more series in development. That's a lot of new Star Trek. Not all of it has been good. Some of it has been staggeringly awful. Yes, I'm talking about you. But that's the way it goes. With so much new stuff being made, you wouldn't expect all of it to be great. Besides, as a great man who sadly never appeared in Star Trek once said, opinions vary. Your fun-filled Valentine to the franchise might be my, if it's a comedy, why isn't it funny? I've certainly got my opinions. In fact, I went ahead and put together my personal list of the 10 best episodes of the new Star Trek shows so far. For the purposes of this video, so far means starting with the first episode of Star Trek Discovery up through the last episode of Season 1 of Strange New Worlds. Season 3 of Lower Decks has just begun as I record this, but I didn't consider any of those episodes for this list. And just between you and me, it wouldn't have made a difference if I had. The only real use of lists like this, other than providing the presenter with something approximating the thrill of public masturbation, is to provide prompts for conversations. So please, if you're interested in this, talk about it with me and with each other in the comments. Tell me where we agree and disagree. But remember, in the words of that same aforementioned great man, be nice. On to the list. Spoiler warning from here on, just in case. Let the countdown begin. Starting things off at number 10, we have the episode that started off what is currently the best of the new Star Trek series. It, like the series itself, is titled Strange New Worlds. From the moment Anson Mount's version of Captain Christopher Pike arrived in Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, fans, particularly those who had been underwhelmed by Discovery up to that point, began to wish for a series set aboard the classic Starship Enterprise commanded by Pike. Fortunately for all of us, that wish was granted, and earlier this year, that series began with this confident, engaging installment that sees Pike returning to the Enterprise to lead a rescue operation for his first officer, Number 1, following a first contact mission gone sideways. Strange New Worlds, the episode, does a splendid job of establishing what will go on to make Strange New Worlds, the series, such a standout. It's a one-shot story with a classic Star Trek feel, incorporating the more cinematic style and production design of the current generation, an unself-conscious sense of humor, and a cast of likable characters played by actors who share on-screen chemistry, led by Anson Mount, who, as he did during his time on Discovery, plays Pike as the cool, funny, principled, platonic ideal of a Starfleet captain. It's not only the best first episode of the current crop of shows, it's one of the best first episodes of the franchise, period, and a signal to us in the audience that we can afford to relax and enjoy the ride, because we, and Star Trek, are in good hands. Coming in at number 9 is an episode from the second season of Star Trek Discovery, but this one's not about Captain Pike. It's about my favorite former fraidy cat, Saru. The Sound of Thunder. This episode sees Discovery visiting Saru's homeworld of Kaminar following the appearance of a red burst, the mysterious signals that drove the plot of Season 2, Above the Planet. The trip home allows Saru to reunite with his family for the first time in nearly 20 years, and by the end of the episode, he, with help from his crewmates on Discovery, has caused every member of his species to undergo a biological transformation that frees them of their instinctive fears and allows them to escape the bondage of their former predators, the Ba'ul. Saru is my favorite Discovery character, and I found the evolution he goes through in Season 2 to be very compelling. He undergoes Kelpian fear puberty on his own prior to this episode and learns that despite it being treated like a death sentence on his planet, it's actually just a natural part of his species' life cycle. So, when he arrives on Kaminar, he's the new and improved Saru, and he's ready and willing to take on the Ba'ul, who have been forcing the Kelpians to be ritually sacrificed for as long as any of them can remember. A great episode for Saru as he fights to free his people and allow them to evolve as he has, and some good stuff here for Burnham and Pike too, as they struggle with how much they should interfere in this obviously unjust society. Of course they want to help free the Kelpians, but can they? Should they? Also, I love the character design for the Ba'ul. While most Star Trek aliens are of the humans with foam rubber glued to their faces type, and I love them for that, the Ba'ul are the rare Star Trek species to seem truly, frighteningly alien. Sticking with Discovery, the series also claims the number 8 spot for an episode from its 4th and to date most recent season, a show titled Stormy Weather. The primary threat of Disco's 4th season is a massive gravitational disturbance called the Dark Matter Anomaly. The DMA, as it's called for short, wanders seemingly randomly through the galaxy and is powerful enough to destroy entire planets that happen to be within its sphere of influence. The best episodes of the 4th season's mostly excellent first half center on the Discovery crew's desperate and increasingly dangerous efforts to understand what the DMA is. In Stormy Weather, Captain Burnham takes Discovery inside a subspace rift left behind by the DMA, hoping that an investigation of the rift will shed more light on the phenomenon that created it. What follows is somewhat reminiscent of the 2nd season TNG episode Where Silence Has Lease. Like the Enterprise in that episode, Discovery finds itself trapped inside a featureless void. But this void doesn't come complete with a sadistic godlike being, and to escape, the crew can't bluff their way out like Picard does with Nagilum. They have to find their way back through the rift using brains and guts. Returning to Strange New Worlds, the number 7 spot goes to Children of the Comet, the latest evidence that comets in Star Trek episodes are very good omens indeed. The Enterprise is tracking a comet when Spock realizes that the comet is on a collision course with an inhabited planet. Their society is pre-warp and the population will be totally wiped out by the impact, but Spock proposes using engines attached to photon torpedoes to push the comet away from the planet, because this is one of the episodes where the Prime Directive works that way. Not the we're not allowed to intervene in extinction-level natural disasters way. Just one problem, the comet turns out to not be entirely natural. The Enterprise's engine-carrying torpedoes are blocked by a force field, and a ship arrives piloted by religious zealots who threaten to destroy the Enterprise if our heroes attempt to alter the comet's course. So, just 2 problems. Somehow, Pike and his crew have to figure out how to rescue an away team that ends up trapped on the comet and stop the comet from impacting the inhabited planet without pissing off the wingnuts on the other ship. And the story of the comet ties in thematically with Pike's own character arc about learning his fate. It's an entertaining, suspenseful hour with some superb character work from Spock and Uhura, and the always delightful Ortegas. It's just about everything you could ask for from a Star Trek episode, and the fact that it's not even the best show from the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds just reinforces what a fantastic series it is. For number 6 on the countdown, we jump to another series, but stick with Captain Pike. It's another episode from Star Trek Discovery's 2nd season, New Eden. A red burst appears near a planet far beyond Federation territory, and Discovery uses its nifty spore drive to go investigate. On the planet, they discover a colony of humans that has seemingly been there for around 200 years. There are no warp signatures, no signs of electricity even. This planet is so far from Earth, it would take 150 years at maximum warp to reach it. So how did these humans get here? That is the mystery that compels Pike to land a landing party consisting of himself, Burnham, and Owoshikun dressed in civilian clothes so as not to give away their identities as space people. The colony is pre-warp, so the Prime Directive still applies. They meet the locals and get swept up in a story that touches on questions of religion, science, the ethics of the Prime Directive, the mostly amicable conflict between Burnham's hard-nosed empiricism and Pike's tendency to look for deeper meaning. Plus, there's some cool stuff aboard Discovery as Detmer gets to show off her fancy pilot skills while flying the ship through the planet's ring system. A great episode that harkens back to those great classic Star Trek episodes where the Enterprise would visit an uncharted planet and find something utterly inexplicable. Also, a great Captain Pike episode. And certainly not the last. Kicking off the top 5, we have another Discovery episode, though not another Captain Pike episode. This one, like Stormy Weather, comes from the show's 4th season. It's titled Anomaly. This is the 2nd episode of Season 4, so it takes place before Stormy Weather, but like Stormy Weather, this episode, Anomaly, tells a focused, mostly self-contained story about our heroes getting into trouble and then having to problem-solve their way out. In the aftermath of the destruction of an inhabited planet, Captain Burnham and her crew are determined to figure out what this gravitational anomaly is and what, if anything, they can do to stop it. More classic Star Trek ingredients, heroes risking their lives in a quest for knowledge, an already risky plan that goes completely awry, and a story with stakes both large and small scale. Besides the well-executed and thrilling main plot, we also get some beautiful character work with Book, who is determined to do something heroically useful after suffering an unimaginable loss in the previous episode, and good stuff involving Burnham, Stamets, and others as well. Mix it all together and you get a truly outstanding episode that shows off Discovery, the flagship series of Star Trek's current generation, at its very best. Moving on to the number 4 spot, we hop back over to Strange New Worlds for an episode that gives the Star Trek treatment to a classic sci-fi story. The episode is titled, Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. The classic sci-fi story I'm referring to is Those Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin. Strange New Worlds takes the basic premise of that story, that a utopian society is able to exist thanks to the suffering of a single anonymous child, and uses it as the foundation for an episode that offers a fresh spin on another classic Star Trek setup, the planet that's too good to be true. Pike and his crew think they're helping to protect a revered child called the First Servant from a kidnapping plot, but as the episode and the investigation into the attempted kidnapping go on, certain things don't add up. There's something about this plot and this ideal society that doesn't feel right. Even if you've never read the Le Guin short story, you get to a point where you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then it does, and part of what makes the episode so brilliant is how it forces Captain Pike to make a choice that not only challenges his ethics, but potentially costs him a better future. Pike's main point of contact on the planet is Alora, a kinda sorta old girlfriend. He confides to her about the seriously disabling accident that awaits him in his future, and Alora offers to allow him to come live with her, where the advanced medical technology of her planet could treat his injuries. It would mean the end of his career in Starfleet, but it would also mean not having to use a beep chair for the rest of his life. It's a tempting offer, until Pike learns the truth about the First Servant. Pike tries and fails to rescue the child, and being forced to accept the First Servant's grim fate also means accepting his own, because after seeing what Alora's utopia is built upon, Pike knows it will never be a part of his future. We've reached number 3 on the countdown, and for this one we turn to one of the more interesting corners of the current phase of the franchise. the series of mostly standalone shorts, collectively titled, appropriately enough, Short Treks. The number 3 slot in the top 10 belongs to what is far and away the best of the short treks, an exquisite little piece called Calypso. Calypso takes place aboard Discovery, but features none of the established characters from that series, except for Zora, the ship's artificially intelligent computer, who doesn't actually become a part of the series until after this short, even though the short takes place long after any of the events of the series so far. The other character in this two-hander is Kraft, a human from a future version of the Federation who happens to drift by the abandoned Starship Discovery as he's about to die in an escape pod. Zora saves Kraft and they bond over games and movies and long conversations, growing closer even as Kraft yearns to take Discovery's only remaining shuttlecraft and try to make it back to his family. Lonely Zora, like the mythical nymph for whom the episode is named, is reluctant to let Kraft go, but ultimately she realizes that she must. It's potentially a little confusing if you get bogged down in the details of how Calypso fits in with Discovery, but the important thing to remember is that those details are not important. Calypso is a simple, charming, bittersweet tale of two lost souls who cross paths and are able to give some happiness and comfort and companionship to each other for a time. It stands on its own as a sweet, sad, achingly human story, and it stands tall as one of the finest products of the franchise's current creative regime. Taking the number 2 slot in the list is the best episode so far of the series that, for me, has become the most welcome surprise of the new generation of Star Trek. The series is Star Trek Prodigy, and the episode is Time Amok. Prodigy is an animated series aimed at kids, so before I started watching it, I just sort of assumed that it wouldn't be something childless 40-something me would enjoy. But I was wrong. The writers of Prodigy realize that kid-friendly doesn't have to mean dumb. Prodigy, as it turns out, is a very smart show, using a cast of appealing characters to tell clever sci-fi adventure stories that often don't look like the Star Trek we've grown accustomed to, but represent the same values the franchise has always stood for at its best: curiosity, equality, and cooperation. Time Amok has each of the show's protagonists existing in different time frames after their ship, the Protostar, encounters a temporal anomaly. With the ship's warp core about to explode, the characters in their various phases, with time passing at a different speed for each of them, have to work together to repair the ship. Only the hologram of Captain Janeway, who serves as their instructor, is able to move between time frames and coordinate their efforts. It's an ingenious variation on a plot that was previously the basis of an episode from Star Trek Voyager's 7th season, Shattered, and if the show had just been about these young unofficial Starfleet cadets learning to trust each other to solve this potentially deadly problem under seemingly impossible circumstances, Time Amok would still have been a terrific episode. But the creators of this episode aren't satisfied with ingenious. They want to break our hearts. The solution to the crisis ultimately falls into the lap of Rock. The youngest of the Protostar crew, Rock is given the job of security officer because of her size and physical toughness, but Rock doesn't want to be in security. She wants to be an engineer. She gets her chance when she finds herself in the slowest moving time zone of the ship following the temporal anomaly. To repair the ship, the crew must construct a warp matrix, which, as you might imagine, is a pretty complicated project for a crew consisting mostly of children. But when all other efforts fail and end in the destruction of the Protostar, only Rock, in the slowest moving time frame, is left to build and install the matrix. So, alone on the ship, without even the Janeway hologram to keep her company, and with time crawling forward so slowly it might as well be standing still, Rock teaches herself the math, science, and engineering necessary to build the warp matrix then reconstructs the deleted Janeway hologram so that Janeway can give Rock one last important piece of information about the warp matrix: where it's supposed to go. Rock successfully installs the warp matrix, fixing the ship, restoring the timeline, and bringing her lost crewmates back from oblivion. One of those crewmates, Gwyn, has an aside with Janeway where she asks how long Rock was by herself on the ship. Janeway's gut punch of an answer? Too long. Damn. I feel that. Time Amok is a great episode. Not a great episode for an animated series, not a great episode for a kids show, not even a great episode of a Star Trek series. It's a great episode of television, period. It's so great that out of all the episodes of all the current Star Trek series, I can only think of one that's better. Topping the list, my pick for the best episode to date of new Star Trek is from Strange New Worlds. If you watched my episode reviews of that series, this will probably not be a surprise to you, since I called this one the best Star Trek episode produced in at least the last 20 years. I'm talking about an episode called Memento Mori. A destroyed colony and a damaged freighter turn out to be the bait to draw the Enterprise into a trap laid by the Gorn, the merciless hunters who lurk in the shadows just beyond charted space. The Gorn attack, the Enterprise takes refuge inside a nearby brown dwarf, and what follows is a game of outer space cat and mouse good enough to stand alongside Star Trek classics like Balance of Terror and the battle between the Enterprise and the Reliant inside the nebula in Star Trek II. Memento Mori combines two elements that have shown up in other episodes on this list: a fresh variation on a sturdy but well-worn premise, and a focus on creative problem-solving. It's hard not to think of Balance of Terror when watching this episode, but part of what makes Memento Mori so good is that it's able to evoke that classic episode without making any sort of specific reference to it. Funnily enough, Strange New Worlds concludes its first season with an episode that does make very direct reference to Balance of Terror, and it's a pretty good episode too, but not as good as this one. The story is gripping and suspenseful and provides opportunities for several members of the show's excellent cast to shine. First among them is La'an, the Enterprise's chief of security, and the only person aboard to have actually survived an encounter with the Gorn. With help from a mind meld with Spock, she's able to dredge up a memory with some information that helps to even the odds against their enemy. Meanwhile, Uhura and Chief Engineer Hemmer wind up trapped in a cargo bay. Drains on the ship's power mean Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel need to treat wounded crew members using old-fashioned, low-tech triage methods. And, on top of everything else, the longer the Enterprise remains hiding in the Brown Dwarf, the closer it gets to the black hole that is slowly devouring that Brown Dwarf. Everything works together to ratchet up the tension, to push the stakes higher, and to make the chances of our heroes surviving seem smaller and smaller and smaller, until finally, after taking one last desperate risk, they do survive and escape to fight another day. It is rock-solid storytelling, superbly executed by the cast and crew. The various character arcs we follow throughout the episode get satisfying payoffs, and there's an extraordinary moment with Pike when he fears Uhura and Hemmer have been lost, only to learn seconds later that they're okay. His relief is visceral. And much like Janeway's aforementioned line from Prodigy's Time Amok, I didn't just see it, I felt it. Thrilling, emotionally exhausting, but also immensely gratifying. Memento Mori is the best episode of Strange New Worlds, the best episode of any of the current Trek shows so far, and by far the easiest decision I had to make when writing this list. The top 10 went through a couple of revisions as I was putting it together, but the number one spot was set in stone. Nothing else from the current generation beats it or even matches it, and if anything does in the future, I will consider myself to be a very, very lucky Trekkie. Which actually I do anyway. As I hope this video demonstrates, there is an embarrassment of riches to be found in the current generation of Star Trek shows. There's some garbage too, and some stuff that, well, let's say it just isn't for me and leave it at that. But there's also so much that is good, and even some that is downright great. Beyond the top 10, there are 5 other episodes that I feel warrant honorable mention. In chronological order by release date, they are from Discovery, Season 2's Through the Valley of Shadows, the episode where Captain Pike learns of his beep chair future and accepts his fate for the sake of the greater mission. And Season 3's Far From Home, an episode with a strong Western vibe where, after crash landing nearly 1,000 years into their future, Saru and Tilly set out for a remote settlement in search of parts needed to repair the ship. From Prodigy, Dreamcatcher, where the crew of the Protostar lands on a planet with a strange, conscious environment that initially seems to be granting them their heart's desires, but turns out to have much darker intentions. From Strange New Worlds, Spock Amok, where Spock and his fiancée T'Pring swap bodies in a farcical throwback to the lighter side of classic Trek, and The Serene Squall, a mix of action, romance, and shamelessly broad comedy with a huge plot twist thrown into the middle, a potentially disastrous clash of tones and styles that somehow manages to work amazingly well. There you go, my top 10. Plus a little extra. I suspect at least a few of you will disagree with me on some of these, on my rankings, on what episodes I've chosen to include, and almost certainly on what episodes and series I've not chosen to include, but that's great! Like I said, the only legitimate use of top 10 lists like this is to start a conversation. So be sure to let me know what you think of my 10 best list in the comments. Don't forget, you can support this channel by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links to all of those are in the video description. Thanks as always for watching, and I will see you next time.